Let's wait a few more minutes for the panelists to join us. They're online. Three of them. One is already here, but we're waiting for the other two. Hi, Phoebe. Hi, Anastasia.
Hi,
Hello.
Nibusha. Nice to see you.
This is
Hello,
Silvia.
everybody.
Best regards from Istanbul. You have received my schedule and we shall follow, but waiting for Monique to join us. Okay, let us start the session. We're waiting for the third panelist, but I hope he would join us soon. This is the session within the Future Education Conference devoted to education in science and technology for human security and sustainable development. I will be moderating the session. My name is Nebojša Nešković. I come from the World Academy of Art and Science, one of the organizers of this conference. But I'm from Serbia, I'm from the region, close from Istanbul. The panelists are first Phoebe Kunduri. She is from the Athens University of Economic and Business in Greece. Then Monique Zoubi is with us now. He comes from the Arab Scientific Community Organization in Jordan. And Anastasia Makarieva, and she comes from the Petersburg Nuclear Physics Institute, Russia. We shall first hear the panelists, the three of them, then I will make a contribution. We will then discuss among ourselves, and you'll be able to put questions that they answered from all four of us. Thus, Phoebe, the floor is yours. Please go on with your contribution. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. This is an important conference. I am sorry I cannot be there, but it is quite crucial to be able to envisage what we need to focus our education efforts on in order to be aligned with the potential of being able to handle the challenges that we are facing. I will share a document. I don't know if you can see my slides. It would be much more helpful if you can. It will be easier to follow my arguments. Can you see my slides? Yes, you can. Okay.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to claim two things here. I'm going to say that in order to survive as humans in this planet, we need to understand what sustainable development is and implement it. This is not about the survival of the natural ecosystems of the planet. It's about the survival of humans in the planet. So it is important for us to understand what sustainability, sustainable development is, and not only understand what it is, but have an explicit definition that allows quantification of where we stand against sustainable development and where we stand vis-a-vis our ability to implement it. And our ability to implement sustainable development is, of course, a function of our knowledge, skills to understand and implement the solutions, and also our ability to produce the solutions, technological, social, fiscal, financial, governance solutions. So in this presentation, I'm gonna say that it is a very science and data hectic and knowledge hectic challenge. And it is a challenge that we definitely need to focus on finding ways to handle it. I lead the Alliance of Excellence for Research and Innovation of IFORIA. It brings together research innovation centers, innovation accelerators, science policy network, and scientific academies with more than 200 researchers working on science-based and stakeholder co-design sustainability transition. Our thematic areas are, again, about this co-designing of a science-based optimal mixture of technologies, policies, fiscal, financial, social, governance, technological instruments that will allow each and every country, and we can even have subnational and international scales in our analysis in order to implement climate neutrality, climate resilience, sustainable use of marine resources, sustainable use of land and water, food, energy, and biodiversity nexus, sustainable finance, and of course, produce the technology, incubate the technology and accelerate it to the market, and at the same time, produce the education that is needed to provide the knowledge in the labor market, to provide agents in the labor market with the knowledge and the skills that are relevant for implementing it. So these 5 are our thematic priorities. And let me very quickly try to indicate why education is crucial, why upskilling and reskilling is crucial, why AI technologies and digitalization in general is crucial, why data is crucial. So in order to transform, you need first to acknowledge that you are facing a crisis for which you have to transform in order to survive because of the crisis. What is our crisis? Well, it's the integration of socioeconomic crisis, slow growth rates, shrinking fiscal spaces. 1/3 of the countries in the world are at the brink of default, inflationary pressures, increasing inequalities between the global south and the global north, but also within countries, even in developing countries, coupled with the climate crisis, the destabilization of the climate transposed into increased frequency and severity of extreme weather events experienced in all countries in the world and costing trillions of dollars every year in addition to human life. The ecosystem collapse crisis, the collapse of earth ecosystems, land ecosystems, water ecosystems, climate ecosystems, species ecosystems on which our production and consumption is based. And finally, all of these leading and aggravating geopolitical pressures that lead into war. And if you lose peace, then you lose everything. Okay, so we've acknowledged that we are in a state of multi-crisis, and we, as in 163 countries, have signed the UN 2030 agenda with the 17 sustainable goals and the 169 targets within them. And then each region of the world tried to transpose these 17 sustainable development goals into a policy framework. In Europe, for example, my region, because I come from Greece, we have the European Green Deal. The European Green Deal that has been launched, has been announced at late December 2019. And since then, we have voted for 150 laws and regulations, laws that have to do with regulating CO2 emissions and methane emissions and anything that has to do with climate, laws with regards to financial institutions and what is sustainable investment and sustainable finance, laws that have to do with our ambition becoming climate neutral and climate resilience by 2050, and at the same time, by 2030, reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 55% compared to what we had in 1990. And of course, this means a change of regulations in all the aspects of our economic sectors. For example, Fit for 55, which is one of the laws within the European Green Deal that includes 13 other legislative proposals that have been announced in 21 and voted for in 2024. We have regulations for hydrogen, decarbonized gas, the emissions trading system, the revision of the effort sharing regulation, laws for land use and land use change and forestry, alternative fuels, couple border adjustment mechanism, social climate fund, including shipping and aviation and cars and vans in the emissions trading system, directives for energy efficiency and energy performance. And this is just an indication. I don't have time to go through all of this. Now, we have this legal framework, right? We have this legal framework. Sorry about this slide change. And we know that this legal framework is a good mirror of the SDGs. We've done a deep neural network analysis that showcases that the European Green Deal laws and regulations are a good transposition of the SDGs, the 17 SDGs and the 169 goals, targets within the goals, within the 17 goals. The European Green Deal is particularly efficient in implementing all the goals that have to do with the regulation of the ecosystems, with decarbonization, with sustainable industry. Is less strong in the social cohesion policies, but anyway, it's there. It's by 80%, up to 80% there in terms of its ability to transpose the SDGs into a detailed policy framework. So we have that. Now, what we need, I'm really sorry about that. What we need is to figure out how we actually go about implementation. Okay? So in order to implement something, you need to measure where you are, you need to know where you want to go, and you need to develop the pathways, the optimal mixture of policies and regulations and technologies and solutions and fiscal and financial instruments that will allow you to implement. So we know where we want to go. We have our SDGs and the transposition of these SDGs into a very detailed policy framework, the European Green Deal. Do we know where we are? Do we know our initial conditions today? Well, we know that as well as SDSN. We measure every year the performance of each and every country with regards to each SDG. So we know where each country stands with regards to the SDGs. We know the average performance of all the countries in the world. We know the performance of each of the ecosystems. We know the European Union's performance. We know the performance of each country within the European Union, and we know it in detail. Of each indicator, we use 300 indicators to measure that, and we also have projections to 2030, so we know where we are lagging behind, we know the pace of change, we know the pace of progress or no progress, so we know where we are. And we can downscale this knowledge to city level, local authority level, even company level and institutional level and university level. So I am saying here that we know where we are and we know where we want to go. And now we have to construct the pathways. Now, even before trying to construct the transformation pathways, how we are going to move from where we are to where we want to go, you can see how data hungry this investigation is. Only to understand the legal framework and sort it out is a very data-intensive process, a text mining process, to understand the different regulations, their synergies, their trade-offs, and figure out how they can combinedly be implemented. Then the other process of measuring where you are is again very data hungry. You have to be very articulate with regards to collecting the data. It is not explicit. It is not obvious that it is collected by the different scales. It is very difficult to be consistent over time and across space. It needs a lot of effort to do that. So it needs a lot of science effort to translate the target, the goal into indicators, and then to consistently collect the data for the indicators. And each sector of the economy has to do this. Each level of governance has to do this. Each institution, each company, and so on. So we need a lot of capacity and a lot of organizational capacity, but also scientific capacity and financial capacity to even be able to measure and agree where we are and where we want to go. And then the difficult part kicks in. The difficult part where you have to combine the models of the different systems that are involved, the climate system, the energy system, the transport system, the land use system, the marine use system, the health system, the innovation system, the socioeconomic system. We have models in the Global Climate Hub that for each of these systems, we run these different systems downscale to the national and subnational level. We derive the dynamic pathways of these systems in order to become sustainable. And then we integrate the pathways of the different systems and embed them in socioeconomic general equilibrium systems in order to come up with implementable and affordable pathways for each and every country that makes sense in the international level. For example, in the energy system, we use the Balmorel system, which is a very holistic open source energy mathematical model for optimizing investments and operation of power, heating, and hydrogen. It's a very, very big model that at the end of the day will give you optimal expansion, generation, and transmission, dispatch information, electricity prices, and plant revenues, and CO2 emissions. And this is a report that we produced for COP28 in Baku. We presented it that showcases how the Balkans and the EU and the UK, this area of the world, can become 2050 climate neutral, implementing the relevant regulations of the European Green Deal. And at the same time, not only we identify the optimal mixture of energy sources, but we also identify the green corridors, the trade for energy in order to achieve energy security and energy climate neutrality in the countries. And we have done the same exercise for the hydrogen, where you can see in the small box. And this is done for each system. For example, the land use system, for which we work in all the green countries that you can see here. We have a very extensive mathematical calculator that identifies what is the way that the land use of a country, taking into account food, agriculture, biodiversity, land use, and energy, can achieve simultaneously food security and nutrition, greenhouse gas emission goals, biodiversity goals, and sustainable use goals. And then when you have the pathways for the country, for these systems, we try to integrate them using another model of water requirements into understanding how the energy system, the water system, and the land system come together into producing the pathways of the country. And then we also use remote sensing to detail land uses and make sure that the way we construct these pathways is consistent with the requirements of the SDGs and the land use directives of the European Green Deal in terms of soil quality, in terms of water quality. I'm wrapping up. So there is a lot of modeling, resilience modeling, maritime modeling that needs to be integrated into the solution. And the second layer of the solution is, of course, the co-design by the stakeholders. The stakeholders are the politicians, the policymakers, the technology developers, the financial institutions, the businesses, the civil society. They have to be in the process of designing these pathways to bring their knowledge, their experience, their visions, their worries, their preferences, and only if they own the solutions and they have shares for the projects that are going to be implementing the solutions, they are going to be rigorous and incentivized into actually implementing the solutions, because they are the ones who are implementing the solution. And one crucial element in this incentivizing of the stakeholders to be part of the solution is, of course, if they have the knowledge, the capacity, and the skills to actually be part of this co-design and implementation, be part of the labor force that is going to implement the solution. And in this report that we presented in Baku, we do an AI analysis to answer two questions. The first question is exactly which skills our education institutions and our upskilling and reskilling vocational training institution should focus on. We have identified all the skills that are needed in order to implement SDGs and the European Green Deal in Europe in much detail, green digital skills, and then identify the occupations that need to exist in order to implement all these 150 policies and regulations. And after identifying it, we ask the question, how much of this is already in the labor market? And the disappointing answer is only 15% of this is in the labor market. So what do we need? We need serious investment in upskilling and reskilling and transforming our curricula in the education system, all levels of education, in order to truly have the people to implement the policies that are crucial for our survival. The Global Climate Hub, and this is my last sentence, has an infrastructural digital platform that brings together all the data, the models, the results of the models, and tools for the stakeholders to use all this information, decision support tools, virtual reality tools, digital twins that allow them to use the information and science and technologies that is there to sketch the transformation pathways. But even if all this exists in open access, complete open access mode, in order to actually have an impact on the stakeholder and their engagement with the transition, you again need to have stakeholders that know what all this is about, that have the knowledge and the skills. So again, we are pointing to the huge and imminent need to actually produce those skills and that knowledge that will really engage the stakeholders in the transformation. Thank you.
Okay, Phoebe, thank you very much. We'll come back to you in the discussion session. Now, I'm asking Monique to contribute to the session. Please make it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Monique,
Thank
please.
you very much. Nabusha, can I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Good. I'll be quick. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this session. I'll be speaking. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you. Okay, can you switch to slides presentation mode?
I'll be
It's okay now.
Yeah, it's fine now. Yes.
good. In my capacity as the science advisor of the Interaction Council, because I'll be touching a little bit on the politics of science and science education. Now, firstly, very quickly, let me remind myself and everybody of what's on the global radar at the moment. Well, we have war in the Ukraine, in Gaza, in Syria. That is very much on the global radar at the moment, unfortunately. And what's happening in various parts really must outrage us as human beings and must call upon us to rethink our values. Peace, as manifested by the Agenda for Sustainable Development, eloquently addressed by Phoebe a few moments ago, that to me is not only Agenda for Sustainable Development, but it's actually a target for peace, global peace. I normally sum up the Agenda for Sustainable Development by looking at issues that concern me most. We talk about water insecurity, energy insecurity, health, particularly in the light of the pandemic that grounded us at our homes only 2-3 years ago, agriculture, biodiversity, climate change, and again, peace. And to my mind, I would propose that the Agenda for Sustainable Development really is one side of the peace coin, with the other side being the question or the issue of human security as adopted by the World Academy of Arts and Science and as often used as a discussion point to convince politicians in the various parts of the world of the value of providing human security to their population. Now, whether we talk about the Agenda for Sustainable Development or human security, science is the key. Science matters. Science, to my mind, is the tool that we can use to achieve peace, to achieve sustainable development, and to achieve human security. And this was very much prominent in the discussions leading up to the development of the Agenda for Sustainable Development, and it was owing to the efforts of a number of organizations, including UNESCO, that science was adopted as a means, as a cross-cutting means or tool or mechanism at our disposal to achieve sustainable development. There are other science-based tools, including science diplomacy and science education. And this is a quote from a good friend of mine who's a WAS fellow as well. Essentially, Professor Zachary here talks about the critical role that science plays in achieving the SDGs through a number of activities, including the promotion of education, research and development, technological dissemination, as well as the design and implementation of nationally appropriate industrial policies. So let's go back to science education, which is like the underlying theme of this session. Academies, whether academies of sciences or the Academy of the World Academy of Arts and Science, has a role in building up the science culture at the societal level, in educating, but not only at the school level. We need to cultivate a culture of science within society. It's not enough for the science, technology, and innovation engine to move forward to focus on science education at schools, but we need to promote also the culture of science at the societal level. We need to promote science education in schools, and we need to promote science education and scientific research at universities. And indeed, many of the world academies, including WAS, have long realized that this is an imperative, this is an objective that we have to aim at. Indeed, the US National Academy of Sciences had focused on this many years ago and published a very important report a few years ago. You can check that on the internet. It was called Rising Above the Gathering Storm. The French Academy of Sciences also was involved in promoting science education through a very special program, La Main à la Pâte, a few years ago, as well as other academies. And it was, this is a paper that I was fortunate enough to publish about 10 years ago. It talks about science education in the developing world and the Islamic world, and talks about the efforts that the US National Academy of Sciences undertook, and refers to the report on Rising Above the Gathering Storm. It talks about the efforts of Professors Pierre Léna and Yves Carré of the French Academy of Sciences in the domain of science education, and cites an exciting example in South Africa, where former President Nelson Mandela really commissioned the National Academy of Sciences of South Africa and challenged it to inspire the country's youth to seek careers in science, engineering, and technology. So that's one aspect of science education that I feel I wanted to talk about, and I have. Now, the nexus, to my mind, is not only educating school kids and university students, but also educating politicians, societal leaders, because there's a gap, as you all know, between scientists and science and societal leaders and politicians. Both communities think differently about things. Very few politicians understand the possibilities of science or understand the limitations of science. Many politicians have to adhere to budgets. They have to keep an eye on their popular ranking within the population. And many of the scientists do not really understand the mechanisms of politics or parliaments. Many do not have an idea of the political processes or appreciate the pressures or timescales that politicians adhere to. And this is why I think it's imperative to really establish a common ground between politicians, societal leaders, decision makers, and scientists, not only to enhance science education at schools and universities and increase resources allocated to research and development, but also to encourage scientists to come up with solutions and to try and achieve the agenda for sustainable development, particularly in light of what's happening on the global arena in terms of disruptive technologies that are impacting our lives and would be, as well as the rise of artificial intelligence as a tool that we really need to think carefully about as to how we can best utilize this tool to contribute to world peace via contributing to an agenda for sustainable development. Thank you very much.
That's why we don't hear you. Like, it seems to be muted.
I'm done. I'm finished, ladies and gentlemen. That was my presentation.
We can't hear anything from Nebojša. They disappeared.
Well, I propose, Anastasia, that you start, and when Nebojša comes back, he can join and he can see you speaking. So you
But
go ahead.
can they hear what I'm thing because they disappeared from the whole disappeared
Well,
from our
Phoebe and
Zoom
I
meeting.
can hear you, so you have at least an audience of 2.
That's too little. Maybe we can wait just a moment that they are back.
We seem to have got disconnected. So
Janani, Vasuji, what do we do?
but let's go ahead because all 3 streams seem to be disconnected now from the university. So
Okay, so I just share my thoughts. Whoever can hear that, I'm basically I will be very brief because I didn't prepare a presentation because I thought it would be more like an engaging discussion. So I'm studying more specifically the interaction between natural ecosystems and climate in a quite interdisciplinary perspective and framework. And my experience has been that our efforts towards sustainability are to a large degree hindered by the fact that we don't see the system in full, like what actually determines the sustainability of our home, of the earth. And those natural ecosystems that still retain the homeostasis, they are often left out of the discussions. And we only add them to the discussion when we discuss land use, when we discuss water use. So from this perspective of using them, or from mitigating the damage that we have done. But what is missing here, and what I think is important to include into like informing the younger generations, is that these systems, most importantly, the so-called intact forest landscapes that still exist and occupy about 9% of ice-free land area, they exert a very important stabilizing impact on the Earth's climate and environment. And when we don't take it into account, all our strategies can be misguided. Just one example, as Phoebe was talking about the really impressive efforts in Europe towards sustainability, which also include rewilding and setting aside territories for nature. But this comes along together with importing, for example, of wooden pellets from North America and South America. And this is interpreted as green energy and an effort towards sustainability, but this causes enormous degradation of natural ecosystems and those ecosystems that are not undisturbed, but they are evolving into this state. For example, our American colleagues are trying to stop this degradation of the already old growth forests that are decimated to produce wooden pellets that they are transported, say, to Denmark, which is now trying to rewild its territory. And then when we have forests decimated by overexploitation in Canada, then we have these huge fires, and then we have the drought in the Amazon, and then this contributes, as the recent paper in Science says, to the decimation of low level cloud, and we can see an uptick in global warming. So efforts without seeing the bigger picture and the role of natural ecosystems in planetary homeostasis, we can actually make our situation worse, even if we have the best intentions. And as Einstein is said to have stated once, whether we can observe a thing or not depends on the theory which we use. So if we don't count the impact of stabilizing impact of nature and climate into our worldview, we won't observe it irrespective of how much data we get. So I think it is very important to have this conceptual vision of the role of the still remaining natural ecosystems play in our not just well-being, but simply being. So I think that's it. Thank you very much. I wonder whether they heard anything.
Dr. Nisko, do you hear us?
Nebusha, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, Anastasia, have you finished your talk? Anastasia?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Did you hear something?
Have you finished your talk?
Yes, I have.
Okay, we have had problems in communication, you know. We had breaks, but anyway, let us go on. I will now make my contribution, and I will present to you transdisciplinary science, technology, and education model. But just to mention explicitly the existential problems and challenges facing the Earth and humanity today, just to understand the context. These challenges, as I see it, are depletion of natural resources, then pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss, then political, economic, and military interventions, then forced migrations, intercultural conflicts, and wars, and finally, human inequality and inequity. The requirements for a proper approach to these problems and challenges have been defined by A, human security dimensions, and 17 Sustainable Development Goals. You have heard about that many times. But these goals and dimensions taken together represent the complementary parts of a core of a well-defined strategy. However, as the panelists have said several times, the current state of affairs is such that serious concerns about the ability of humankind to carry out them by 2030, as it was planned, are raised. Today, it is clear that the problems and challenges in question have complex and multidisciplinary character, while the efforts of scientific, technological, and educational communities worldwide to respond to them are mostly limited to separated disciplines. Therefore, a systemic and multiple disciplinary approach in looking for and finding their solutions is necessary. This approach, which should lead to sustainability of nature and society, as well as human security and peace, needs an inclusive, scalable, and effective science, technology, and education model. Such a model has been created as the basis of a program of sciences for sustainable development, initiated by the World Academy of Art and Science and launched recently in April this year by the Earth Humanity Coalition. The program is an initiative within the overall program of the International Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development from 2024, from this year to 2033. That decade was proclaimed by the UN, United Nations General Assembly, in August last year. The model has been named the Transdisciplinary Science, Technology, and Education Model. I will very briefly present the model, just give the essence, the basis of it. First, acquiring knowledge along the chain of basic, applied, social, humanistic, and technological disciplines within the disciplinary boundaries. We cannot forget disciplinary research, but that must be complemented with true and effective transdisciplinary efforts. Second, education in basic sciences should exist at all levels with the objective to develop as much as possible curiosity, courage, creativity, and persistence among pupils. 3, special care should be taken about big science, being a science with big machines and experimental setups, to enable the establishment of direct, strong connections of basic science with engineering, medicine, and high technologies, and to contribute to mutual understanding and peace to numerous conflict regions worldwide. 4, researchers in social sciences should develop and nurture a trans-ideological approach to sustainability, security, and peace, in which all existing ideologies will be analyzed in the multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary ways to provide the basis for their transdisciplinary synthesis. 5, researchers in humanistic sciences should concentrate on defining the values that must be accepted on the pathways towards sustainability, security, and peace, and finding the answers to the ethical questions appearing every day on these pathways at the local, national, regional, and global scales. 6, special efforts should be made to enable the influence and enrichment of the results of science being objective and the results of art being subjective, and thus push further the boundaries of a true understanding of nature, society, and human beings with all these interrelations. And finally, 7, novel ways of communication and cooperation of scientists, technologies, and educators on one side, and policymakers and all other science, technology, and education stakeholders on the other side, based on sincere, mutual respect and trust must be developed. Monif was talking about. That has been a brief presentation of a model, and I have completed the presentation. Now, let us move to discussion. And first of all, we have about 10 minutes left for the session. And I'm first asking the panelists to put questions to each other if they have them at the moment, very briefly, and then to try to provide some time for the questions from the audience. Phoebe, Monif, Anastasia, please, if you have questions, go
on. I can start by saying that it is important that the multilateral financial institutions, also the financial institutions within countries, the national financial institutions, finance infrastructure, finance digitalization projects, finance natural resources projects. But what seems to be more important than financing these projects is to include in whatever you finance in terms of a project or a transformational holistic change, to include capacity building. Capacity building for all the people that will be involved in this, capacity building for the general public, for the civil society, for the businesses, for the even the financiers, those that are financing all this thing, capacity building for the politicians and the policymakers, capacity building for the professors and the teachers, so that whatever you build with a cutting edge technology and knowledge, and whatever you build with an integrated holistic framework, which is the correct way to go about, like you said, Nebrosa, it's about interdisciplinarity and systems science and systems thinking. But because the knowledge about how these things work and how you can use them, even if you have them, it's not there, each and every project for me should be accompanied by the relevant capacity building budget. And it is not cheap to create knowledge and capacity. So this should always be at the back of the mind of anybody who is designing a project to support the transformation towards the SDGs. The needed capacity building, there should be a budget for that at a level of education and at vocational training level as well. And I've been wondering whether you know of such projects, you've been part of such projects that bring out the capacity building need explicitly.
Okay, Phoebe, thank you for the comment. Anastasia, Monique, any question or comment to all what you have heard so far, please?
Yes, very, very quickly. I think what Phoebe just said is very important. Everybody is aware of the Sustainable Development Goals in all countries. Many politicians are also aware of the agenda and are trying to implement policies to achieve the various goals and the targets. However, there are gaps in the understanding of many politicians and societal leaders in terms of how they can go about developing policies to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And if they know, those who know the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals sometimes lack the capacity, as Phoebe just said, whether intellectual capacity, financial capacity, institutional capacity to implement, to try to achieve the goals or even monitor achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So that is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. Many of the taken for granted measures adopted in Europe are nowhere to be seen in developing countries in terms of Sustainable Development Goals. So I think a massive all-out effort, if we are really to achieve as human beings, regardless of where we are, if we are to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to share best practices, we need to share capacity to implement and monitor, we need to share financial resources to help less developed countries do something about the Sustainable Development Goals. And we need to, at least first and foremost, realize that we are sharing the same planet. It's no good having somebody address sustainable development in Europe, for example, whilst, for example, the other side of the Mediterranean in North Africa, nothing is being done to address sustainable development. So that's the message I think that I would want to convey. Sustainable development is transnational, trans-regional even, and it has to be a global effort.
Thank you, Monique. Anastasia, if you have a comment, we have a few more minutes.
Yes, just a very brief comment. I was talking about the need to elevate the focus on the preservation of still functional sustainable ecosystems. And I would like to mention that while we aim at sustainable development, it hasn't been proven that it is at all possible. So, and we can develop indicators and move in some directions, but whether we get there, it is not guaranteed, and our progress hasn't been very impressive as we all recognize. So, but we do have actual sustainability in front of our eyes. It is the natural ecosystems that are working on the basis of not producing pollution, regulating climate, regulating the atmospheric moisture transport that alleviates water stresses that are now ravaging the world. And so this should be an integral part of any major educational program, any discussion on sustainability, and it shouldn't be buried under other formal categories of and many different aspects of what we would like to see in our life. And what Nebojša, you said about the need for basic education and basic science, I would add that this education should include basic information about how the biosphere works. For example, even in this audience, can anybody answer how much the biosphere cycles carbon in relation to our emissions? This is very basic knowledge showing the capacity of the biosphere to influence the environment. But I bet very few people can immediately respond. And this shows a very disturbing level of ecological and environmental illiteracy with which we can't go far towards sustainability. So this should be improved, in my opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Can I say something very briefly? One other very big challenge, and I agree with the previous speakers, is how we can escape from our non-disciplinary, our disciplinary silos to the interdisciplinary, not just the research, but also education. This needs a deep transformation of the curricula of all stages of education, the primary schools, the pre-primary schools, the high schools, the universities. And we know as academics how long it takes to revise curricula, to transform curricula, and transforming into interdisciplinary curricula, and creating awareness about the need not just for interdisciplinarity, but also intradisciplinarity, allowing the stakeholders to have a say. I think we are already hugely delayed in putting emphasis on this effort, because it is only through education that we can change. And we know what we need to change, but our education systems have not changed yet.
Thank you very much, Phoebe. Unfortunately, we have to finish this session. I'm thanking very much Phoebe, Morif, and Anastasia. This has been the Education and Science and Technology for Human Security and Sustainable Development session within the 7th International Conference on Future Education. Unfortunately, we haven't had time for the questions from the audience, but I hope you have enjoyed the session. Thank you very much. A message to the panelists. The audience is large. The hall is full, just to understand that. I'm thanking you for coming here, for attending the session, and see you somewhere soon. Thank you, the panelists, and thanking the listeners. Goodbye.
intelligence. Anyone of you used artificial intelligence in your learning? Yes. One person, you did. Okay. I think they're afraid to admit they use it. I'm very curious how you do it, but we also hear from some speakers who try to do this in their work. So what we are going to explore is, I think there are two interesting questions that we have on the table. Well, I will say many more than two, but to begin with, one is, what do we see as the current potential and implications of artificial intelligence for learning? Because, for example, if we start talking about testing, and in higher education, tests are usually essays. People are assumed to process what the course has taught them and write an essay. And now what many students do, they go to ChatGPT and just ask to write an essay, and it will produce essays in very different styles, will get good rankings from teachers. And teachers have a massive problem because they no longer can validate that you actually learned anything. But if you are a professional sitting in the office, would you be expected not to use AI in your work? You probably would be expected to use it now because it increases your productivity. So isn't it, to some extent, stupid not to encourage students to use AI? And then the question is, how do we assess people knowing that they are going to use AI? So this is just one of many questions we have. The bigger question is, of course, okay, where do we draw the dividing line between something where we rely on AI and something where we rely on ourselves? We rely on our ability to think, we rely on our ability to draw conclusions, but we also probably need to rely on other things that are not modeled by AI at all, like social skills, ability to communicate with others, ability to collaborate with others, because people typically in higher education, in secondary education, are assumed to be learning individually. You're not supposed to collaborate with anyone. Now, in the age of AI, where you have the cognitive ability, individual cognitive ability modeled by the machine, supported by the machine, wouldn't it be smart to develop exactly that? The ability to collaborate, the ability to sense each other, to experience each other, right? So these are some questions where we, start to draw different borderlines. Is what we need to learn, where we engage AI. So I hope that in the conversation with our speakers, many of them are online, and we have Alberto in the room with me, we'll explore this. So what I suggest, colleagues, let's make sure we are not only delivering our messages, let's make sure we have some discussion. We have about 45 minutes now for this process. So let's start by starting with your 5-minute positioning, expressing your ideas, but keep it to 5-6 minutes maximum. And then we'll make sure we'll have more conversation between us. Let's start with you, Chandra, and your experience, because India maybe is one of areas where AI is really needed, because the massive need for learning is surpassing the ability to invest into learning at the scale that is needed now for India. India rapidly needs to upskill a lot of people and maybe in some cases create a context for basic learning. So their hopes are that AI will do the part of the job, but that's probably not the only context that you see in your work. So what would you say about the potential for AI and whether you see the strongest potential? Chandra, please unmute yourself again.
Thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. We stand at an extraordinary moment in the history of education, actually at the history of everything. the rapid rise of generative artificial intelligence has given us tools that can revolutionize teaching, learning, research, and administration. Yet this progress has created a significant challenge, a widening gap between the potential of AI and our collective ability to use it effectively. Instructors often find themselves grappling with the unfamiliar tools. Researchers may not fully grasp AI's capabilities. Students can misuse it without guidance, and administrators struggle with integration into systems. So this discussion, this presentation is about one essential goal, bridging that gap. How do we equip educators, researchers, students, and administrators to harness AI effectively, ethically, and productively in learning? So first, why does AI matter so much in education? AI has the power to transform how we teach, learn, and manage education. Imagine a classroom where AI personalizes the learning experience for every student, providing support tailored to their strengths and weaknesses. I'm sure Alberto would like this person-centered approach. Picture instructors using AI for automated grading and deep insights into students' performance. Researchers can use AI to process and analyze data at a scale never before possible. For students, the stakes are higher. They will enter a workforce dominated by AI-driven industries. Learning to use AI now is as essential as learning to read and write. For administrators, AI promises smarter decision-making, efficient resource management, and the potential to enhance every aspect of education delivery. But we have a problem. Without adequate preparation, these opportunities remain untapped or misused. That's where education on AI comes in. The skills gap in AI is real, and we see it everywhere. Instructors often lack familiarity with AI tools, leading to resistance or incomplete adoption. Students may use AI for shortcuts, like generating essays, without understanding them, undermining learning outcomes. Researchers sometimes overlook AI's possibilities because they lack training, and administrators struggle with decision-making about AI tools without understanding their full implications. I'll give a quick example. How many educators today know how to responsibly integrate generative AI tools like ChatGPT or AI-based platforms into their teaching? How many students understand both the power and ethical implications of these tools? The answer, unfortunately, is very few. Bridging this gap is not just a good idea. It is an urgent necessity. Now let us focus on how to close this gap. The solution lies in education and training tailored to each group: instructors, researchers, students, and administrators. Instructors need hands-on training, workshops, and certifications on using AI tools. Adaptive learning platforms and AI-powered assessments should become standard. Imagine teachers not just assigning homework, but guiding students on how AI can assist in brainstorming, researching, and refining their work. Researchers need access to AI resources, platforms, data sets, and training on advanced AI methodologies. Interdisciplinary collaboration is the key. For instance, a literature scholar could work with a computer scientist to analyze themes across thousands of texts using AI. Students must learn AI literacy, not just its usage, but also the ethics surrounding it, teaching them to use AI responsibly, avoiding shortcuts, questioning outputs, and integrating AI into their problem-solving processes is essential. AI should empower learning, not replace it. Administrators play a vital role in implementing AI across institutions. They need training on how to choose the right tools, manage AI-based systems, and ensure data privacy and ethical standards. Policies supporting AI adoption and development should be a priority. By addressing the unique needs of each group, we can build an ecosystem where AI is not feared or misused, but embraced and optimized. In conclusion, AI is not just another tool. It's a transformative force that can redefine education. But to harness its potential, we must address the skills gap. The question is no longer whether AI will shape education, but how well we are prepared to shape that future. So I leave us with this challenge. How can we, in our roles, take the first step to educate ourselves and others about AI? Do we really understand how to use the AI effectively? Are we leveraging its potential responsibly? Are we fully tapping into AI's capabilities in our work? Only then we can confidently answer yes to these questions. Does it make sense to offer strategies to others? Let us not wait until the gap becomes unbridgeable. Together, we can turn this challenge into opportunity for growth and excellence in education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now move into this phase, in this opinion. What are your thoughts on AI application, especially as a psychologist? Where do you see this is going? What kind of learning needs to happen?
Thank you, Bob. Well, as a psychologist and psychotherapist, but more, I think, as a trainer and as somebody that works on pedagogy, empowering pedagogy, and also interest in the sociology of knowledge. Having followed, I'm almost 80 years old, so that's my perspective. But I have a lot of younger colleagues in my institute, which is a non-profit organization, partner of the World Academy. We are working with AI, and yet I have not seen it. I was very worried during the debate that it would be one of the most destructive existential threats. Existential threats means destroying humanity, total, like atomic bomb, apocalypse. Well, honestly, either I'm blind and my group is blind, and I didn't find it yet this level of concern. Actually, I'm more excited and also individually about what we've been able to do. And our institute did for the World Academy also a research. So I think when the computer came in, when the internet came in, there are always great potentiality and also new dangers, because it's not, in my opinion, the problem with artificial intelligence, but with human stupidity. I'm not using this as a pun, but seriously, it's us that create technology, and technology produces the effect that we created through producing those tools. It's not that there is evil in the tool or in the new way. So instead of, being scared, we have to be aware of what we do as usual. And we can do really bad and look at the climate and look at the wars. So we can really be harmful. But that is not artificial intelligence. That would be taking away responsibility from ourselves. It's in our hands. So this is the first, also existential positioning, and also I think a scientific, sociological position, because the sociology of knowledge, they see that the reality, we live in a reality that is socially construed. So it's not who construed the reality? You people. So it's not racism, but it is people that discriminate against other people. It's not like an illness. It's always people doing it. The other thing, I see enormous potentiality, and especially in terms of what I'm interested. I'm applying it, and I'm a pupil of Carl Rogers that brought scientifically validated modality to have student-centered, people-centered, or person-centered. I also sometimes work with the whole university where the whole pedagogy, not only for teaching and learning, also the people that are in the office and the owners that are being trained to be more participatory. What we see is 80 years of research that show what I think we're gonna see in thank you. We're gonna see also on this field of artificial intelligence. If we make value transparent, if we make power line transparent, if we are involving all the stakeholders, the result would be, following the premise. If we want to exploit more, if we want to manipulate more, then we would have a different result. But let's not be hypnotized about artificial intelligence. It's a tool created by humans. So would be those human or firm what kind of artificial intelligence they created. Otherwise, we take the responsibility where it belongs, to human beings. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a very similar position. I call artificial intelligence a connecting Rorschach test. You know that Rorschach test, you have these plots of ink, just random figures, but you look at it, a different person projects different situations. Some will see violence, some will see sex, some will see beautiful flowers. It all depends on the content of your mind. And I think we have exactly that in the case of AI. We project that it's an enemy, or it will be a god, or it will be something else. It's our projection. But I'm curious to know from Tuba now, what is your opinion and what is your work with AI?
Thank you very much. Thank you. I just wanted to quickly ask, is it okay for me to share my presentation and go through the presentation, or you want me to only answer verbally?
As long as you can keep yourself to 5 minutes, you can do that.
Okay, I will go briefly because I want to talk about the frameworks and the educators' competencies. May I share my screen quickly? So I think you can see it. Just to remind myself, I'm Tuba Aydonoğlu from Hatay Mustafa Kemal University. I have been working at the university for the last 10 years in the Department of English Language and Literature. So today I will be talking about AI competencies of educators. So within the educational ecosystem, we can see that teacher is the key agent for us to carry out the intended curriculum and what we want the learner to understand and know at the end of the educational period. The teacher bears the key importance in the ecosystem. So when we are talking about AI, we need to concentrate on the questions in the minds of the teachers. What do I do with all these AI potential, and how do I integrate this AI instances in my lessons? So from this point of view, I'd like to remind a couple of frameworks, and I'd like to point out some importances of these frameworks and talk a bit about the language educators. So as you can remember, UNESCO had ICT competency framework. This framework is really important for institutions and the units who would like to carry out the curriculums. And if you want to start a distance education curriculum, this is a really good guidance for you. But after this framework, we had DICOMPEDU, created by the Joint Research Center of European Union. And in this framework, as you can see, the fifth and the sixth points, as you can see on the screen, they underline the importance of teacher, because according to this framework, the educator bears the agency in the classroom to facilitate not only the students' digital competence, but also they should be the ones who are leading them to gain more better understanding about digital competencies. So this framework is building a base for us to understand the AI competencies. So when you think about TPACK, you may remember technopedagogical competency framework. Çelik, in their study, they revised this framework according to AI. So when we are talking about AI competency, we need to think about knowledge and information literacy. So this is the main base that we need to think about when we want to develop teachers' AI competency. So knowledge base, content knowledge base, and pedagogical knowledge base, and technopedagogical knowledge base instances are in this framework. And also there is the ethics that should be kept in mind while using AI and its instances. When it comes to UNESCO's AI competency framework, as you know, it is divided into two. On one hand, there is the student competencies, and we have also the teacher competencies. And when you look at the teacher competencies, it has all the instances which lead the teacher how to apply and how to use AI in their educational process. And there is this one I want to go just over quickly. So when we think about these frameworks, they do not carry a huge meaning to the teacher. What we need to do is to find a system, as it was mentioned before, an ecosystem which helps the teacher to understand what these frameworks mean and how to use these frameworks in order to manage the ultimate learning. So when you look at the learning today, it is not just conveying the information, but it is also experiencing and living the information, because through AI, it is not just communication, but also there is a huge transfer of information. So today's learning is not just about finding the correct information, but also how to synthesize and make use of the best fit information according to context or according to the aim. So when you think about all these complexities brought by AI to education, assessment is the key to find the best way to enable the best way of learning. So for assessment, it is important for us to think about how to make sure the way of assessment is conveyed through the AI instances. I will just talk briefly about my research on language educators. With the language educators of English and Turkish, I did an extensive study, a mixed method study. And it is seen that despite we are talking about AI competencies, still most of the teachers, educators have the level of A1 and B1 of digital competencies. What do I mean? As you can see in the screen, these levels are from the DCOMPEDU framework. So from the study that we have seen, despite the teachers have a really well-informed and theoretical knowledge about digital and AI competencies, when the tests test results are observed, their level do not go above B2 level. So as you can understand, these B levels are the threshold levels. So this says that the teachers also need scaffolding, not just the students, but also teachers need scaffolding to improve their digital and AI competencies. And it is important for especially language teachers to adopt a systematic way of assessing the students, because with the correct way of assessment, it will be really easy for the teacher to find the best fit for the learner and the specific level of the students. To wrap up, I needed to go through really quickly, sorry for that. To wrap up, let's go back to the educational ecosystem. If the teacher is the main agent in this ecosystem, it is really important for us to think about what and how teachers can understand and evaluate and synthesize and lead AI potential and AI instances in their own teaching process. So it is really important to highlight AI competencies of educators. If you have any questions, I can take them. Thank you very much.
I'm sure there will be more questions that we will manage to discuss. So let's move to the fourth speaker in our panel. Sensor, I hope that this is the right way of saying your name, or Sensor. Speak up.
Close enough, thank you. Again, hi, thank you for inviting me for this panel. It just comes a little bit of a surprise because I was told to speak for 15 minutes. So I have lots of slides to talk about.
Sorry to let you know that.
Yeah. That's okay.
I have more time to share in the second round of questions, because that's what I would like to have.
Yeah, I'm just going to go through what I have prepared for this presentation very quickly for the next 5 minutes, and then possibly answer some questions. I'd like to start by asking the usual question. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, just a little bit of a background about me. I'm, first of all, define myself as a teacher. I taught mathematics, science, and computer education in different countries. For the last 15 years, I've been a teacher educator. From what I am going to summarize today is from a STEM education perspective, the role of technology, how it all started in the 1980s, and then moved on to the era of artificial intelligence. So it's going to be a little bit quick. At first, I remember I was asking myself why in the 1980s the technology boomed so quickly. It came into the classroom, and one of the first examples was, of course, the Loga programming language. Seymour Papart's work with the Loga programming language was something revolutionary in the way that we understand computers and how they work. Many times he's also considered as the father of artificial intelligence in education, but his programming allowed us to see computers more than devices to deliver information. They could actually empower students to create, to program, and to think mathematically. Before that, it was mostly students plugging numbers into a calculator. Then learners in different classrooms around the world started talking about conjecturing and hypothesizing and then seeing it in action on a computer screen, making abstract ideas visible on the screen. So here I was going to talk about my one incident that happened as a young teacher to me. I was working on as a school teacher, and at the school that I was working, there was one single computer and an Amstrad 6128. I don't know if anybody remembers those old technologies now. And the computer was in the department head's room, and I was eager to use it in my lessons. To my disappointment, I was told, this tool cannot be trusted with a young teacher like yourself. So it remained locked away, gathering dust, but it symbolizes that a cautious gatekeeping that prevented technology's potential from being realized. Of course, in the 1980s and in the coming years, we opened educational technology departments at universities. We cultivated a generation of educational psychologists at the schools. And then we started using graphing calculators, dynamic geometry software, and all the other different software that will make teachers' job easier and more importantly, making learning, define learning in a more constructivist way. And of course, for a while, we thought technology might level the playing field, making quality resources accessible to all students. In Turkey, for instance, large-scale projects tried to bring computers. Then very recently, modern tablets and smartboards into every classroom. These educational technologies we educated, they were supposed to lead the pedagogical innovation at the schools, but they found themselves spending more time fixing the hardware or troubleshooting software than guiding learning. So, of course, in more recently years, we started seeing this big pharma-like companies, Google Education, Microsoft Schools, and Apple Classrooms going into the educational arena with Gusto. They offered certifications for teachers. They offered user-friendly platforms, ecosystems designed to extend digital learning. What worried me when I was working with the teachers, seeing all these big companies going into education, was their tremendous influence over what schools purchase, but more importantly, their influence on how teachers teach in the classroom. So, of course, my disappointment about the internet was mostly because I was a young university student when it just came into being widespread and limitless access to information. Wikipedia appearing to offer democratic access to knowledge. Anyone could contribute. I spent hours on editing all these articles and contributing to the knowledge base there. But at some point over time, increasing regulations, editorial concerns raise questions about openness and bias. Social media nowadays, Twitter, or it is called X now, was supposed to be spaces for intercultural exchange. There are allegations of censoring opinions, spreading misinformation, and misusing personal data. So these digital tools once seemed like liberators, could easily become gatekeepers. And instead of expanding learning opportunities, they can actually limit the learning opportunities as well. Okay, is my 5 minutes already finished?
It's okay, yeah, 1 more minute.
Okay, I'm just going to go a little bit quicker then. Of course, I like to come to the AI and the role of AI today, but I was lucky to be the student of Dr. Gerald Kuhn, one of the distinguished mathematics educators, and then he wrote in a journal that I edited almost a decade ago. And he was reminding us the real meaning and purpose of assessment. And he was saying that for some reason, for the sole purpose of accountability or competition for funding or international comparisons, we have developed a distorted view of assessment. However, assessment should drive the curriculum, instruction, funding, and everything else in education. I quote him saying it. So what I see as a risk today about the AI is we risk narrowing the purpose of learning if we treat technology as a magic solution. I don't believe technology should, I believe technology should serve the learning, not dictate it. And for some reason, machine learning, the using of the concept learning, it seems like there's a deliberate attempt to change or narrow the meaning of learning as we understand it from a constructivist point of view. I think I'm going to stop here, hopefully answer some questions. Thank you.
Yes, we certainly will. I'm going to ask the question. I can see one posed by Chandra, and I was going to ask something similar. But let us put it in a context. Thank you very much for your presentations. That's really interesting, the work you do. And I'd like to have this second round of questioning before we end the panel, which is first of all, let us recognize that the current state, the current situation with AI is not the status. It's just a point in the progress of this very rapidly, in fact, exponentially developing technology. So exponentially means that it's multiplied let's say every moment in time, it's doubled or tripled. So it's not a linear progression. It's a rapidly growing capacity where we in fact will have much more powerful systems in just a few years from now. And some people expect that what we are going to have in just 3, 4, 5 years, I'm talking about people that are inside the field of research of AI, inside the companies that are developing artificial intelligence. They're talking about the age of artificial general intelligence as something that is not theoretical anymore, as something that can come in just 18 years from now. And general intelligence, unlike narrow artificial intelligence, means that it will be a type of intelligence that will be able to basically model the world, understand in some way understand the world, and make general conclusions, make basically the same or maybe greater cognitive tasks that humans are able to do. And we are just years away from that situation. And already now, we have systems such as ChatGPT or one that can solve problems, write essays, address challenges on the level of a qualified PhD graduate. So that is already, let's say, in some areas comparable with what humans can do. And that is not going to stop. So the question is, on one hand, we are talking, all of the speakers are talking about incredible potential of AI. On the other hand, we heard this story about ethical concerns. On the third hand, what Sensor just mentioned is that we should not rely on AI as substitute for human beings. I think that's a very valid point. So let us, from different perspectives, look into the future and ask ourselves, is there a role for higher education in, say, 2035, in 10 years from now? And what will be the kind of university, Estonia or any other, in 10 years from now? And let us go speaker by speaker, just focusing on the point that you've been making, just to elaborate on them. Let's begin with you, Alberto, because you made a more general statement on one hand about existential threats, and on the other hand, you were saying that there is an enormous potential. Now, looking into 10 years from now, please let's keep 3 minutes per person. What are your 3-minute statement about the future of university, the future of higher education, and its role in the age of artificial general intelligence?
Thank you. Well, I hope because in 2 years probably I'll be dead. But I'm working with my mind and my heart and my people at the institute that will carry on what we're doing right now, trying to find people-centered, value transparent, power sharing, artificial intelligence as student-centered education. And we try to do it with scientific validation. It's 80 years that we have a large amount of evidence that having student-centered education is more effective than traditional, where the power is all on the professor, on the administration. The same thing, I hope, for artificial intelligence, and we're doing it right now. We have the Academy and my student created this trauma-informed care best practice, where we give away for free knowledge that actually traditional university rarely give. And now we find it how to make a chatbot that would allow us to give it away for free in many languages. And how we do it? We do the research and we bring in all the stakeholders, also the people that are sick and have been treated in traditional hospital or traditional. And so by empowering, that's my hope, by being intentionally democratic, empowering all the stakeholders and making the synthesis, which you have to do, transparent, and we choose this I hope that for humanity, there is a better future, because at the other side, it's a nightmare.
Thank you. So student agency, in a way, is at the center, learning how to act, empowering people. Very nice. Chandra, you were talking about the skills gap that we already observed in use of AI. And if you try to project that into the future, and the future that we are discussing here, and also maybe taking into consideration what Alberto just said, what do you see the skills gap for students and for teachers if we prepare ourselves for this rapid expansion of AI and its potential?
So we have been doing research in India and other developing countries. Here, most people don't have access even to computers. But the advantage with artificial intelligence is most people already have mobile devices. They have mobile phones. With mobile phones, they will be able to use artificial intelligence tools. I think that is a blessing. So it is even before even before AI was introduced to the masses, students and teachers were good enough in using mobile devices. So we don't have the problem with hardware. It's only the techniques of using artificial intelligence tools that we had to teach them. If we can do that, skills gap can be closed considerably. Yeah.
Thank you. Tuba, you were talking a lot about the teacher competences that need to be developed, and especially seeing AI as a kind of partner for teachers. You were giving really interesting examples for language education. Thinking into the future, let's say, how this technology evolves, what would be, on one hand, your expectations for it to, what kind of role it's going to play in the educational process a few years from now, on one hand, and what kind of teacher competences need to be developed to really be able to cope with this technology?
I think we need to tackle this question from 2 points of view, because at first we need to think how rapidly it's evolving. And in 10 years, we wouldn't be talking about the systems that we are using today. So it will be through the brain chips, people would be talking to each other, machines would be integrated in daily routines of every person. So on one hand, we have the question of where the reality is going, how the reality is evolving with AI. And this reality, how that helps us shape education. So when you have the reality and you cannot manage the thoughts and the language of people, you won't be able to have an effect on the education. So we need to tackle this question with not just the competence of teachers, but also strategies of governments, strategies of institutes and institutions, because AI is rapidly changing and it's evolving in a speed that it is really hard for us to grasp, especially in the countries like Turkey, where on one side there are really huge companies and every technological aspect is growing really well, but also as Professor Chandra pointed out, there is a huge skill gap between the students and the teachers and the schools with limited resources and limited fundings. So the question here is not what's going to happen in 10 years. I think the most important question is how we can be ready for the things which may happen in 10 years. There should be strategies, not just for teacher education, but also how education should evolve in this 10 years. It used to be, sorry?
Exactly that, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I did not mean to interrupt you. I only wanted to support what you're saying.
Just to wrap up, what I try to say is it used to be, education used to be just a transfer or transferring information. And now we are living the information. We are experiencing the information. And in the future, it will be, information wouldn't be a question. It will be just humanity versus machines. So we need to be able to grasp this change. This is what I mean. Thank you very much.
Censor, you are tasked with a very interesting type of work. You are training STEM students, people who actually are developing systems like artificial intelligence. And you mentioned the limitations of AI in your work and in education in general. So, and I saw the question from Professor Chandra also about the most critical skills instead that can be developed. So looking into the future, to be able to cultivate people that are not only working with this sophisticated system, but are able to develop and evolve them and integrate them like Tuba indicated, what are the most important skills that you think needs to be developed, especially in STEM education?
Thank you again for this question. I mostly work with teachers, STEM teachers, and I try to help them become better STEM teachers using technology in a meaningful way to construct knowledge within the classroom. So only a couple of maybe a year ago, the artificial intelligence ChatGPT, the most developed LLM right now, wasn't able to add two numbers. If you ask 2 + 2, what is it? It will just say 6 one time and then 7 the other time. Now, with the Wolfram Group, which I'm working with, developing these technologies, the artificial intelligence and the LLMs are able to solve complex mathematical problems. And we can actually help the students construct these knowledges through AI tutoring systems. But many times I see two risks of AI's future, which may not really happen the way that you envision or people expect it to be, to grow in an exponential fashion. One is technology has been the driving force in education and in our lives for the last 40 years because of low inflation and the role of technology, the investment in R&D. They started with again with tutoring systems, very basic in the 1980s. Now they are developing more advanced systems. I'm not sure if it is going to be the way that we envision it is with this kind of a pace. The other thing is many times the people who develop these technologies, they're not really empowered by the pedagogical principles, pedagogical developments, constructivist views that we developed for the last 50 years. Many times for them, learning means something else. So there is that risk as well. And I see student teachers being in the middle of those two different understandings of learning, assessment, teaching. The one which makes the AI or technology in general more prevailing in the classroom, and the other one is more using technology as a tool to use it as a tool in the classroom. So I think we have to see which way the AI is going to go in the future to have a better understanding. But with all these regulations and governance around the AI, I think we have to wait a couple of more years to understand how it is going to shape the education arena. It will be just too premature to envision a future where AI is basically dictating all different aspects of education.
Thank you, everyone. It's time to close this session. I would like to thank all the speakers for your contributions. And I think one of the important learnings is that what I hear from you, Sensor, what I heard from Alberto and some other colleagues is that we should not cement our, let's say, limitations or our distorted perception of things like learning into AI systems, that's for sure. We need to make sure that these systems evolve with us and not become the way to constrain human beings. And to find ways in which they, I think that was the word in some regard, was said by all of the speakers today, is that human ability to act, human ability to think, human ability to feel is at the center of human learning. And we should not substitute that with the learning done by machines. So that is where teacher's role definitely will stay. Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
When to go, I know it's exactly 4:20. Just wondering.
Someone there, yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Dory, welcome, Dory. Welcome, everybody. My name is Amanda Ellis. I'm joined at the Oregon I also represent the Arizona State University Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Provider. It's my great pleasure to be here with you all at Istanbul today with a very esteemed group of international panelists. I'd like to begin with a Maori greeting, which is the indigenous language of the Maori Island. Like I just greeted you all as important leaders, and I greeted you 3 times, as is the tradition. Once for the ancestors who are always with us in terms of their legacy, once for all of you important people in the room, and once for future generations. Indigenous wisdoms always think 7 generations ahead. And as we gather today to talk about the climate crisis and the importance of education for livable futures, it is so critical that we think about you and your futures. So I'm delighted to introduce our 3 panelists. Each will present for 5 minutes, and then we'll have a series of questions and an exchange with you on the floor. So online with us today, we have the United Kingdom of the Commonwealth of Hawaii, Gregory Akinini, who is also an environmental lawyer, who worked with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, known by its acronym NOAA in the US. And she played an extremely important role in terms of marine national monuments. Is that the largest marine monument in the world and still the largest in the United States. Second, online, we have with us Professor Theodosiou, who is an engineer and a waters resources expert. He is director of the postgraduate program Protection of the Environment and Sustainable Development. So we'll have some very interesting professorial insights to share. And last but definitely not least, with us here in the room today is a former minister and member of parliament for 3 decades from Ireland, climate minister, environment minister, energy minister, communications minister. This man played a number of very important roles, and he currently chairs the Interparliamentary Union Science and Technology Working Group. For those of you who don't know, the Interparliamentary Union is the world's oldest multilateral body. It has 181 member countries out of the 193 members of the United Nations. So a very important body, and we're delighted to have you with us today, Terence Morton. So I'm going to start by asking you, Dory, who has had a lot of experience in the field, tell us a little bit about her background as an environmental lawyer and what she thinks is important in terms of education for this existential climate crisis that we are currently experiencing. Midori, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amanda, and aloha, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very humbled to be here and engaged in this important conversation. You might hear the wind. We're having a bit of a windstorm around me right now. So if you hear things in the background, it's part of that climate change scenario. My background is in environmental law. I graduated from school and went right to Asia to practice environmental law, which surprised people because it wasn't really a thing then. But I've carried on and had some wonderful experiences learning and practicing in this area in Asia, the Pacific, and around the world doing different projects for the World Bank and in the Oslo Paris Commission, who takes care of the marine environment for the North Atlantic. And so here I am in Hawaii and been asked this very important question about the future and what it is that we could best use in education to help us on this combating this climate challenge and this changed world that we are now living in. I deal a lot in the Pacific, and you can see very readily what is happening to our communities here and on the other islands or in the Pacific. So when I think of what we need in our education, first and foremost, I think we need real good critical thinking skills across the board for no matter what subject matter we need to upscale. It's those critical thinking skills that we need, because although we know what's coming in the future, we don't know exactly what form it will take, what options we'll have, and we'll need to be able to think through these new scenarios in this climate changed world to have the most flexibility to exercise our options that the communities will choose to deliver to themselves and define how they'll be living in this climate change world. So with that, it's I wanted to just put forward some practical applications for what I think are, from the experience that I've had, are important. And these critical thinking skills are necessary to have a common operating picture with intersecting views for what we think of as climate change. We won't all agree because the view won't be the same across communities, but having critical thinking skills will allow us to agree on the facts of climate change so that we can start at a place instead of debating whether or not climate change is happening. So I think that that's important. It lets us not waste time with a discourse that is not taking us to a positive place. I think the critical thinking skills are important to enable negotiators and to have people that are savvy in finance, because part of the resilience and the response will require big projects and large actions to come to communities. And we want communities to be able to manage their own response to climate change. And that takes financial savvy and to be able to negotiate what it is that you need. Workforce development is another theme that is important. I hear this talked about a lot in the circles when we're thinking, okay, well, what is it that your island needs? Well, workforce development, how to develop and maintain skilled workers that are trained to do, whether it's solar or community grid or what have you, people that will stay at home and work on these issues. And then critical thinking, again, to have skill sets that are are in the community that can monitor the climate change and also the success or develop initiatives that are different than what's being employed. People that are savvy on the ground, that know what's working and what's not working. So, and the last thing that I'll mention is the idea of preservation techniques and what cultural preservation for places and artifacts and cultural practices means. And this, I think, is another area that we need people to be able to be supported and engaged in this. I mean, while we're combating climate change on a physical level, the cultural level is also a space that we need to shore up. So I have lots of examples that I'll wait for the discussion to share, but these are some of the practical applications that I've seen in my experience that I think are important for us to live in this climate changed world.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Midori. And for those of you in the room, you will have noticed Midori talking about whether people believe that climate change is happening or not. And this is an interesting part of the conversation that we will get into later. There's the science, and we know that 99% of the scientists agree that climate change is happening. We're seeing extreme weather events all around us. Hawaii just experienced the worst wildfires with the most number of deaths in the United States. And yet we're also seeing a lot of mis and disinformation from interested parties. So I want to ask a show of hands from the room. Is everybody currently studying climate and the climate crisis as part of your curriculum? Can you put a hand up if it's part of your current studies? Oh my goodness, I'm not seeing anybody. Wow, can we try the opposite? For those of you who are not currently learning about climate, can you raise your hands? Should be the rest of the room. Now there's some who are on the fence here. Okay, so I'm going to perhaps tell you a little bit about my personal experience and how I came to think climate education was so critical. A few years ago, I was New Zealand's ambassador to the United Nations, and we were negotiating the Sustainable Development Goals. And at the time, goal on climate, goal 14, was being talked about, but in advance of the Paris Accords. And I am very ashamed to tell you that back in 2014, the vast majority of all of my colleagues really didn't think it was a big deal. Now, fast forward 10 years, and we are seeing already last month 1.6 degrees Celsius surpassed for the first time. So things have moved a lot faster than we thought. And I was privileged to meet a philanthropist called Julianne Wrigley, who is the name in the Arizona State Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory, who really opened my eyes. And I thought, wow, it is so important for us to be addressing these issues. Julie founded 20 years ago the first School of Sustainability in the world and the first Global Institute of Sustainability. And about 5 years ago, she said, well, sustainability is no longer enough. We really need regeneration because we've done so much damage to the planet. We need to be thinking about regenerative practices. And Midori mentioned that when she talked about cultural as well as environmental preservation and the importance of the linkages. So the philosophy of the Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Lab is that we need just and regenerative global futures, both grounded in indigenous wisdoms and leveraging high tech, so that we can also bring in all perspectives, deliberately multi-stakeholder and transdisciplinary. And when I went to university, I'm an economist and I wanted to study French. And it was the biggest battle because the economics department said French is irrelevant and the French department said economics is irrelevant. Well, I went on to be an economist at the OECD in Paris, at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and I needed French. But it gives you a sense of what the thinking was like 40 years ago. So now we really believe that we need climate education and transdisciplinary approaches to be fully integrated into degrees. So we're so grateful to Istanbul University on the forefront of research and science in Turkey to have welcomed the World Academy of Art and Science to really think about these issues and talk about how we can integrate them. Midori talked about green jobs. 2/3 of the jobs by 2030 haven't been invented yet. So for you guys, it's really important to have, as she said, the critical thinking skills, the intersectionality, the ability to engage in communities and to respond, and the knowledge of these jobs of the future, which are going to be probably for 2/3 of you, the jobs that you will be going into to help save the planet. So I'm going to move now to our second online speaker, Professor Nikolaos Theodosiou from the University of Thessaloniki, who is a brilliant scientist. And Professor, I want to ask you, from your perspective as the director of the postgraduate program of the Protection for the Environment and Sustainable Development, for all these brilliant young people in the room who are thinking about their futures and their educational pathways, give us a sense of how you are adapting to ensure that your students are well equipped for the coming climate crisis.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to participate to such an interesting panel and topic. I'm sorry I'm not there with you. I wish I was. It's really much more productive and efficient to be in person.
244 million children are out of schools. This is UNESCO's report. We seem to have a crossover with another panel, so we're just going to double check, because Professor, we know you do not have that higher voice. Please only hear it. Do I need to keep the microphone on? Okay, if I keep the microphone on, it seems that it stops the cut to the other conference rooms. So we're going to be very quiet while you speak, Professor. Please go ahead.
Okay, so can you hear me now? Is it okay? Okay, thank you. So I was saying that I'm really sorry that I'm not there with you in person. It's really much more productive to have a face-to-face conversation, especially with young people, young students. So I'm really excited to be a member of this panel. Just a couple of things before I answer to your question. I wanted to say that, as you said, I'm a professor at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in Greece. I'm also directing this postgraduate program, which focuses on sustainable development and protection of the environment. And I'm also chairing one of the United Nations networks, which are called Sustainable Development Solutions Networks. The network that I chair is the one for the wider area of the Black Sea. So it comprises 12 countries, most of the Balkan countries, all the countries all around the Black Sea, including Turkey, of course, which is a valuable partner in this network. And in this, the goal of these networks are to mobilize the scientific community, including, of course, students. This is not something that we need to forget, to provide new and innovative solutions for the implementation of the SDGs. And of course, one of the main goals of the SDGs, one of the center goals, is climate change. So what we are doing with this networks is that we are trying to identify especially the research that is performed within the universities and make it more tangible and combine it with the research that is performed in other networks or in other universities, introduce the research results into teaching and into education agendas, because this is the most important thing, to communicate with young people, with the young generation, to make them understand about the challenges that we will face, especially in the future, that are dependent on climate change. As you mentioned earlier, we are facing we're facing a speed up of the impacts of climate change. We are facing now things that we expected to happen, but not now, in a few years. And we are identifying these effects in areas of the world that we didn't expect them to happen. What happened in Valencia recently is something that needs to take us back to the drawing table and start discussing again why it happened and why we had so many casualties. And how is this connected to climate change? Is it just climate change, or is it other things that we need to combine? So what we are trying to do, especially with the younger people, is try to engage them in this process of dealing with climate change on both levels, on mitigation and adaptation, because especially regarding to mitigation, is their future we are talking about. It's our present for everyone about adaptation, but it's their future about mitigation. So we need to engage them, we need to involve them, and we need to convince them, we need to educate them correctly, to present them with all the scientific data that we have in our hands, and to make them more active. And they are active, I'm sure they are, to help everyone facing this, to face this challenge of climate change.
Terrific, thank you very much. I want to ask a question before we introduce the former minister of the young people who are here. The points that were made about young people's futures are really important, but it was actually Fridays for Future and a young Swedish girl sitting on the steps of the Swedish Parliament by herself that created a massive youth movement that really brought attention to the climate crisis. So it is your futures, and we oldies have not been doing a good job definitely. So I wanted to commend all of you. It's an amazing packed room, which shows just how important this issue is to you. And I also wanted to give you an invitation. We run a program called Turn It Around, and I have a card and a little present for all of you. So come and see me before you go. This is a program whereby you can either write a note to the policymakers or draw, and I'll show you some of the examples, which are beautiful. And this, I can promise, we will give it to the Secretary General of the United Nations. So here are some of the examples of artwork and messages. And it's a global. So we would love to have you involved. Please come and see me afterwards, because youth voices are critical. And we heard the Secretary General saying, we are on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator, which is a very graphic image. And that's why people like our final speaker are so critical. Having played a role as MP for 30 years and minister of so many important portfolios, we would love to hear from you about your perspectives around climate education, what is happening in Ireland, and in your role with the Interparliamentary Union, what do you see happening in science and technology in the 181 member country?
Thanks, Amanda. First of all, can I ask the audience here, anyone here who is not doing medicine, put their hand? You're all medicine students, are you? Yeah. So, look, you were asked the question earlier, are you learning about climate and the impact of climate? And I was surprised to hear that you weren't. So I'm going to bring this down to the impact in terms of your own careers. In Turkey, there are 1.8 times more people dying each year from poor air quality that died at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Each and every one of you are going to be dealing with patients that are going to be presented in front of you with the impact of air quality. In Ireland, 1 in 5 children in Ireland suffer from asthma. 1 in 13 adults suffer from COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Why we talk about air quality and climate debate? The reason I talk about air quality is that air quality is the opposite side of the same coin. Because most of the air quality issues that we have here in Istanbul today and in most cities across the world are as a result of fossil fuels or the burning of solid fuels, all of which are related in the long term to climate emissions. And if we can improve the health outcomes for people today in terms of air quality, we can also improve the long-term impact of climate on our environment. And by improving air quality, we can improve the health outcomes. So as Minister for Climate in Ireland, one of the projects that I developed was very much looking at the co-benefit between air, patients, and energy efficiency. And what we did was, we took some of the most deprived communities in the city of Dublin. We retrofitted those homes to reduce their energy emissions in terms of insulating their homes, replacing their heating systems with energy efficient heating systems, taking out solid fuel out of their heating systems. And we asked the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine to do an evaluation of that. But the London, and we specifically targeted homes where there was either an asthmatic or an older person with COPD. And the outcome from that analysis by the London School of Hygiene was that patients were attending their GP less, they were being prescribed less antibiotics. If they were being admitted to hospital, they were their admission to hospital was shorter, and one of the longest stays in hospital of any patient in the Irish health system is patients with COPD. They remain in hospital 2.5 times longer than the average patient in hospital. So if they were being admitted less to hospital and their stay was less, that has a significant knock-on impact on our health service when 1 in 13 adults have COPD. We also found that more of those patients were being discharged directly back into their own homes rather than into a step-down facility. The patients themselves and the citizens found that their homes were far more comfortable to live in. So there was a social benefit as a result of that. So what we need to do in relation to climate is to look at co-benefits, like the one in terms of retrofitting homes with reduced energy consumption, but also improved indoor air quality, which improved the quality of lives for the people whose homes were retrofitted and improved their health outcomes and took pressure off our health service. And the one single biggest impact of tackling the climate challenge that we have today globally is in terms of health outcomes. We are now in a situation in the world where the next generation, its lifespan, is going to be shorter than our generation. This has never happened before. It has always been incrementally, we have been living longer. Now we're seeing that change because of climate. And that's why it is so fundamentally important to each and every one of you and to your day-to-day lives, because sadly, you are going to be at the coalface in relation to this. You are the ones that are going to be presented with the patients that are coming into emergency departments because of the impacts of heat, because of the impacts of poor air quality, mainly because of malnutrition, because they cannot afford to buy the imported food that can no longer be grown here in Turkey because of the change in our climate. And what we as global leaders need to do is to get off our high horse and stop talking down to people and start looking at potential co-benefits where one action can have a positive action somewhere else. And that's why what the World Academy of Arts and Science is so important in doing this concept of human security. It's about looking at the individual. Rather than looking at the global, let's look at the local. How can we improve the health outcomes for individuals? How can we bring climate and climate action back to a local impact in a local community and build that up into a momentum for national action and international action? And if we can do that, I think we can really change the whole global attitude, proactive attitude to addressing climate change in the medium term, but health outcomes in the short term. Thank you.
And as mathematics, I really resonate. In terms of co-benefits, if you're all going to be doctors, you probably are not interested in this, but guess, I'm an economist. Can anyone guess what the amount of money we all contribute to fossil fuel subsidies is every year? And I'll give you a clue. It's not in the millions. Anyone guess? Wild guess, and I'll give you a prize. Wild guess. 300 billion, did you say? It is more than 300 billion. Any other wild guesses? 1 trillion. It's more than 1 trillion. Any other wild guesses? Do I have an advance? 3 trillion. Do I have an advance on 3 trillion? Per annum. It's more. From what? $7.1 trillion in fossil fuel subsidies. So crazily, when we think about co-benefits, think of all the money we could save. So 2 trillion in cash and 5 trillion in polluter not paying. And the International Monetary Fund estimates that were we to get rid of those subsidies, we would have a drop in emissions of 34% by 2030. And we need to get to about 42%. So we would be 3/4 of the way there if we were not just using our taxes to subsidize the fossil fuel companies. So that's another very important co-benefit along with the health co-benefit. And I want to issue a challenge to all of you. Every 5 years, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change asks countries to put forward more ambitious commitments, and they're called nationally determined contributions. They're due in February. So please write a letter to your local representative. Tell them that you don't want $7 trillion a year spent in fossil fuel subsidies annually, and you would like Turkey to make more ambitious contributions because of all the co-benefits that you have heard argued so brilliantly. And for those of you who've got phones or tablets with you, please Google Parliaments for the Planet, and you're going to see a number of tools that have been developed with the Interparliamentary Union, including climate trait, tracking real-time atmospheric climate emission, and you can find out, for Istanbul, what is the biggest source of emission. You can also look up your climate laws on the next little video down in terms of the database, and then the third video tells you about the subsidies. So it's a very good tools, given that we have an expert here from the Interparliamentary Union. I'd like to come back to Midori to talk to us a little bit about this idea of mis and disinformation. In American schools, 1/3 of schools only teach that climate change is happening and it is person-made. 1/3 teaches we don't know, and another third teaches it's not true. So you can see that there is a huge challenge. I know people are shaking their head. There is a huge challenge with deliberate disinformation, and the fossil fuel lobbyists are 10-1 on Capitol Hill in the United States. So Midori, please tell us a little bit about the challenges of mis and disinformation, especially facing young people and students in terms of how they know what is real. That is going to be.
All right. Thank you for the question. That's a big question and it's a tough one. Of course, the result is easy to see with all the contentious debate that we have, and all the energy that we're basically wasting in this debate because we have not invested enough, in my view, in our education to allow people growing up from a young age to engage in critical thinking and this discourse and to evaluate information as is it real, is it not real? I was speaking to some educators just this last week in the climate space, and they said we need to get to the young students and we need to expose them to this information as they're growing up. And I thought, well, yeah, that's very true. What happened to you? Why did you get into this business? Well, I saw a cartoon when I was young, Captain Planet. This is our climate change coordinator telling me a story about being exposed at a young age. And so I think, Amanda, as you mentioned, there's such a diverse teaching curriculum across the country that I'm in, that we can't help but end up wasting energy in debates because people aren't exposed to a common view growing up. And this, I think, we need to work to combat. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think what's interesting is that for those of you who are familiar with the educational body at the OECD, what's called the PISA, the International Student Assessment, is now going to make climate compulsory by 2028, which means that ministries of education all over the world are going to have to start thinking about how will you as medical students going to learn about this. And as the former minister said so eloquently, learning about the co-benefits and then thinking about how you as individuals need to tailor your own profession to be prepared for what is coming inevitably with the climate crisis. Professor, I wanted to move to you in our last 15 minutes now and ask about solutions. What is it that you see has been most successful in terms of the kind of climate futures education that you have been engaged with as part of SDFN, where Turkey plays a prominent role?
Sorry, you addressed the question to me?
Yes, thinking about
Yes,
moving
yes.
from the myths and disinformation to solutions, what are some of the things that you have found to be most effective in the integration of sustainable and climate-focused education, especially within the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, where Turkey plays a prominent role in the Black Sea Group?
Yes, yes, of course. First of all, I would like to point out that along these networks, the Sustainable Development Solutions networks, there are also youth branches of these networks. So there is an SDSN Youth Black Sea, there is an SDSN Youth Turkey, which is a very active network, and I would like to invite the students who are following this discussion to look it up and to join. These are very, very active networks. I really love working with young people. They have such brilliant ideas and a completely different and more productive way of communicating. So these networks are really very, very important. The youth branches of these networks are really very important because they are networks organized by young people, addressing young people. And this is really very important in order to overcome all these obstacles that we have during the communication of the traditional communication between professors and students, which is something that creates silos and creates a distance, introduces a distance between the two communities of universities, which is meaningless. We need to come together with the students and work together with the students.
That sounds brilliant. Can you tell them where to go to find out if they're interested in signing up or telling their friends about it? Are you able to tell us what the site is or
of
a
course.
URL, something that we could pop up potentially on the screen or we can give to people here? If you would like to be involved yourselves, there's an invitation from the big boss himself. And if you have friends, other young people you want to tell and they might be interested in joining, this is a fantastic global network. This is the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. So there you have, fantastic. And now I would like to come and finish with some more solutions. Tell us a little bit about what has worked in Ireland, what hasn't and why. You told us about the tidal in Hawaii. I'd love to hear more about that. And what's happening within this IPU think tank?
How long do we have? So, maybe just to finish off the medical students here, in terms of air quality, because the points I've just raised are here and now. We also know that air quality is now associated with earlier onset of dementia. We also know that air quality has an impact on children's ability to learn. And for the guys in the audience, it also has a big impact on male fertility. So I think climate change is something that you should be all very conscious.
The list is not complete yet.
and the list is not complete.
Yeah.
And this is all related to climate change, because remember that governments around the world are spending $2 trillion directly in subsidies, in actually subsidizing the fossil fuels that are causing all of these negative effects, as well as turning a blind eye to levies of $5 trillion. And all of this is having such a negative impact on your day-to-day lives. So what we've been doing in Ireland, which has been really successful, has been taking this concept of human security and bringing it down to the local level. So two things that we've done in Ireland is, one of them is we have started a national conversation on climate change, talking about the double-edged challenges, the impacts of air quality, the impacts of flooding. We've had communities that have had to be evacuated permanently, homes that have had to be closed permanently because of persistent flooding. So we actually went down into local communities. We got the global and international experts on climate change to come and meet face to face around a round table of 10 people and let the experts explain what's going on globally and the impact, but for the experts to listen to the impact that this is having on the ground in communities, where the locals along with the international experts can share their knowledge, local indigenous knowledge with international scientific evidence, and to come forward with a series of recommendations. In tandem with that, we work with young people and older people who've taken an interest in the whole area of climate change and ask them to advocate on it, to explain the impacts, the negative impacts, and the positive steps that we can take through our Climate Ambassadors program. And these have been two very successful programs in engaging directly with individuals, in talking in plain language to citizens around Ireland about the real impacts. Because the difficulty with climate change is that most people that lecture you, and they do lecture, tell you what you can't do. Very few actually talk about the positives in taking action. And, you know, there are parts of the world where they deny climate change, but they have big problems with air quality. So regardless of climate change, let's focus on the air quality. In a country like Ireland, we're a net importer of significant amounts of fossil fuels, and yet we have an indigenous source of renewable energy off our coast, offshore renewable energy. On a daily basis, we consume about 6 gigawatts of electricity every day. Off the west coast of Ireland, the Atlantic Ocean, we have 70 gigawatts of electricity. We have enough potential electricity there to not only supply our domestic needs, but to supply the domestic needs of France and Austria as well as Ireland. So even if you were a climate denier, it makes economic sense to become self-sufficient in energy. And the most effective way to become self-sufficient in energy is through renewable energy. Yes, there is an upfront cost in relation to it, but over the long term, it makes the best value, and it's a sustainable fixed price. It's not like oil that can go up and down, or gas that can go up and down. Now, I don't remember it, but I'm sure some of your parents or your grandparents definitely remember the oil crisis that we had in the 1970s. And at that time, governments made a commitment to not to be so dependent on fossil fuel imports. We are more dependent today than we ever were, and yet it is having such a detrimental impact on our health. So that is the reason why we in Ireland need to address this, not just because of climate change, but because of the health of our own communities and our own economic independence. And it's the same for Turkey. It's the same for every other country or most other countries on this planet today. And it's about looking at those co-benefits, building on those, and taking action that will make a real difference globally.
And what a perfect ending. We are right on time. Fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you, panelists. This has been a wonderful session. And please, I want all of you to come and see me. I've got a little comment for everybody before we end. Co-benefits, coming back to the importance of critical thinking, intersectionality, community engagement and response, workforce development and green drives, innovation techniques, and of course, this focus on the co-benefits. Thank you all so much. As Margaret Edwards said, it's not.